Okay, good evening, everyone. I have decided to go scriptless this evening. I figured I would talk to you about this book exactly how I would describe it to a student in ISW. So I was chosen to read Minute at the Dragon Cafe. Okay, so first off, I'm going to talk about the author, Judy Fong Bates. Next, I'll move into a plot summary, then the book excerpts, the one that Veronica read, and also one that I found, and then some key themes that really tie the whole book together. Okay, so first off, Judy Fong Bates. She was born in China in Kaiping, Guangzhou, which is really close to Hong Kong. She immigrated to Canada as a young girl. Her works have been recognized by Canadian journalists around the world, and now she's very well known in Canadian literature. Now she lives in the GTA with her husband on a farm just outside of the city. And her story, I think, represents the true Canadian dream that all immigrants dream of when they come to either Canada or the States, that they will find success that they were unable to find in their previous home. Okay, so the plot summary. So first off, Su Jen, the main character, her Canadian name is Annie. Her mother and her travel to Irvine, Ontario, which is a fictional town, but it's supposed to be just about an hour south of Owen Sound. At that time, this is about the 60s and 70s in China, and they're escaping the communist regime. At that point, her father is already in Irvine, and then he's waiting to meet them, and he went a couple years beforehand. So Su Jen struggles to adapt to Canadian life, and she feels very isolated for being different. This is found out right away through different instances of bullying and also demeaning terms used against Chinese people. She discovers many of her family's secrets along the way. So she discovers that her father and her brother are actually her stepfather and her stepbrother, and that her mother is really her only true family member in the family. Also, she experiences many deaths throughout the book that sort of teaches the reader how to not only deal with death, but also how to move on. And then next, she discovers an affair, which she actually finds between her mother and her stepbrother, which is very shocking. But I thought it was a great thing to include because not only does it keep us reading, but it also makes us rethink how boundless, or like what bounds love. And we find out, obviously, that her stepbrother and her mother are not related. So although it's very strange and slightly terrible, it's not in any way going to end up on the Maury show. And then later she also befriends Charlotte Harrington, which I'll tell you about in a little bit. Next, there's tension between Su Jen's parents. So Su Jen doesn't know if her father knows about the affair yet, but later she discovers he does know. But there's this tradition in Chinese culture to swallow bitterness that she describes, and the only way to sort of move on and deal with situations is to keep it inside. So he keeps it inside for the happiness of the family. Li Kung, her brother, who Veronica discussed in the excerpt, is planning to get married, and his father is really pressuring him to get married very quickly. And so they keep discussing mail order brides throughout the book, and finally they find one that they're going to choose. Her name is Mei Yi, and she finally arrives, and actually Su Jen really likes her, and she ends up being a good addition to the family. And then Charlotte, who I mentioned on the previous page, near the end of the novel, right when you think everything is going to be all well and good, Charlotte and Su Jen decide to go out on Irvine Lake at night when it's frozen, and then Charlotte falls to the ice and actually drowns, which is extremely sad, but it really shakes you and turned the end really into a page-turner. And then finally, her mother's pregnancy, which I think was the most shocking event in the entire novel. She becomes pregnant with her stepbrother's kid. Okay, so the book excerpts. So the one that Veronica read is the other one. I'm going to discuss this one first that I found. So there's an excerpt, and I guess I'll read a little bit of it. Okay. I woke up suddenly in the middle of the night and found my mother's side of the bed empty. For a while, I stayed in bed and stared into the dark. The rain had stopped. I finally got up and opened the door to the fire escape. No one was there. I stepped onto the platform and felt the wet wrought iron slats pressing into my bare feet. I peered over the railing and gazed down at the empty alley below. I looked up and saw hazy moon suspended over the houses on the other side. For the first time in days, the air felt cool against my skin. Everything was so still, broken only by the drip of water and the beating of my heart. I should have gone back inside, but instead I shivered in the dark as I leaned against the damp brick wall next to my brother's window. Compelled forward by something I didn't understand, I edged over and peeked between the half-drawn curtains. There they were, lying together in the moonlight on his bed, my long, dark brother on top of my pale, slender mother, their naked bodies coiled around each other like snakes. I pressed my hand over my mouth and stared, then dashed into our bedroom, got into bed, and pulled the covers over my head, my heart racing. Okay, so obviously a very shocking passage, and obviously one I didn't see coming. And like I said, it was a very cliffhanger moment. So throughout the book, it's sort of like a lead up into what's going to happen later, and then finally this event happens and really shakes things up. And like I said, nothing will ever be the same. So this completely not only changes the dynamic between Soo-Jen and her mother, but also between Soo-Jen and her brother, and then without the entire family. And it causes a rift within the family, like I discussed. Her father finds out about the affair, but also learns to swallow his bitterness. And also, Soo-Jen's mother becomes very upset and tries to wean Lee Kung off of getting a mail-order bride because they are in a relationship. Okay, and then the one that Veronica discussed is Soo-Jen and the mail-order bride. So in this section of the book, Soo-Jen is talking with her friends after school, and she's discussing the mail-order bride, Mei Yi, that's on her way to marry her brother. And her friends are very shocked by this because they've never heard of a mail-order bride before. And they ask, how can you marry someone who you don't even know? And for the entire book, Soo-Jen thought this was totally normal. She had no idea that this wasn't something typical in Canadian society. And all of a sudden she's exposed to it. And she feels, like I said before, isolated. She feels left out, and she can't understand why they don't understand her own culture. And then because of this, she starts to question her own cultural heritage. Is my Chinese culture right? Is it correct compared to the Canadian customs that I'm being introduced to? Okay. So I picked 3 major themes in the book. So the first major theme that I discovered were just cultural divisions and how that makes us act differently around certain people. So Soo-Jen's parents speak very little English, and she has to translate a lot of the time for them. And then one term that they actually teach you in the book is that a lot of Chinese immigrants who aren't able to speak a lot of English refer to Caucasians or Westerners as lo-fons. So they call us lo-fons a lot throughout the book so that you understand that they're talking about the they in the book. They also discuss many Chinese customs like myths and marriage. So as I discussed, the mail-order bride is the marriage aspect. There's myths also, like I discussed with Charlotte's drowning. Earlier in the book, Soo-Jen's mother predicts or says that there's a myth that because of the spots on Annie or Soo-Jen's body, that there will be a water monster. She feels that the water monster will affect her, but in the end it actually swallows, is the metaphor they use, Charlotte into the lake. There's also a lot of racism and verbal abuse toward the family. Multiple times they refer to the Chinese family as chinks, or they call her father Chinky Chinky Chinaman, or they call him Hop Sing, which is a character from Bonanza.
Sorry about that.
Oh, sorry.
I pushed something. Ready for the next slide?
No, and then finally, I found multiculturalism in schools was a huge aspect. So they discuss not only culture in her school, but culture in her family and how to deal with it in school. And I wonder if there's any difference. As I said on the slide, I'm in concurrent education, so one of the topics that I actually discussed a couple weeks ago was multiculturalism in schools, and are we really dealing with it in the most appropriate way? And the main argument was saying, are we trying to be diverse, or are we trying to be inclusive? Because while trying to celebrate other people's cultures, you also want to integrate them into the Canadian family and make them feel welcome. So it's really hard balance to find, and I don't feel like enough has been done. As much as we claim to be a multicultural society, I don't think we're quite there yet. A second theme I found was bullying, which I think is a huge issue that not only spoke to me in the book, but I feel could really relate to all the students coming in for ISW, because they've either seen it, been part of it, or were a victim. So Soo-Jen is teased and picked on for her misunderstanding of the Canadian way of life, like I discussed with marriages, but many other things also. There's verbal and physical abuse, so like the examples I gave for verbal, but also at one point she's riding her bike in the community and a girl comes and knocks her off and also says racial slurs to her. And like I said, I feel it's relatable to all students, and there's swallowing bitterness again. So Soo-Jen, throughout the book, she wants to fight back, but her parents keep telling her that swallowing bitterness is the best way to avoid conflict and to keep everyone happy. So she bottles it up inside until finally she can't hold it in anymore. And the most major theme, I believe, with the book, and I didn't realize this until the end, was dealing with death. So Charlotte's drowning sends Soo-Jen into an emotional tailspin. She doesn't really know how to react. At first she's really sad and sort of shocked. Then she sees Charlotte's mother at the funeral and she feels angry and guilty that she wasn't able to do anything to help. And then she talks to Charlotte's mother later in the book, and Charlotte's mother tells her, it's not your fault, it's okay, it was an accident. But then Soo-Jen also says, well, the water myth told me that she would drown or someone would drown, so I should have known better. So it's really hard, but it's great in telling us that death is not always our fault, but sometimes we feel like it is our fault for not doing enough. And I feel like not only does it teach, did it teach me that death is never easy, but I feel like it could show all students coming in that there are different ways of dealing with death, and there's no really wrong way to deal with it. Okay, so to conclude, I believe that, like I said, it's a true Canadian success story. So Judy Fong Bates went from sort of an impoverished childhood in China to a very prosperous one in Canada, where now she's a famous author. And it can connect it and teach all incoming Trent students, like I said, about cultural divisions, bullying, and dealing with death. And the best part, one of the best parts I feel like, is the length is very appropriate for summer reading. I feel like all the students that will come in for ISW, they will have either reading levels from the 70s to high 90s, and it's good that you find something that can balance for all different types of reading levels. And I felt that it was a pretty easy read. It kept me reading the whole time, which is really difficult to do in the summer when there's so many other distractions. And I said it was a page turner also. It has a lot of cliffhanger moments and some that I didn't even reveal to you yet. And I feel like a huge message that it can teach is that love can come or overcome adversity. So throughout the book and in the end, we discovered that although everything has happened with the affair, the death, everything that's happened between her mother and her brother and her father, and also other incidents with people outside in the community, that their love for each other can actually overcome all of the struggle, because at the end, they all look into each other's eyes, and there's really nothing to say except that they love each other. Thank you.